As you've probably noticed, I'm not shooting this video in our office. This is in fact my apartment, and I apologize for the mess. Life has to go on though, and apparently so do new product releases. Earlier this week, Apple announced a handful of new hardware upgrades. There is, for example, the new MacBook Air, which uses the Magic Keyboard that we first saw in the 16-inch MacBook Pro and is configurable with up to a 10th generation Core i7 chipset. So in theory, at least, you're looking at performance that tops out at twice of what you get from the previous model. But I know what you're really here for. I know what you're dying to hear about. So let's get right into them. All of these new Apple Watch bands, there's a ton. Let's go. No, I don't want to talk about those. What I really want to talk to you about is the new iPad Pro. After giving its premium tablets a major revamp in 2018, Apple left them completely untouched for all of last year. An upgrade was inevitable, and thanks to some insightful leaks and analyst reports, the eventual announcement wasn't a complete surprise. What's a little more surprising is how quickly Apple is now blurring the line between iPads and traditional laptops. To be clear, Apple started laying the foundation a while ago. The third generation iPad Pros made the switch to USB-C to allow for external accessories like mice and hard drives. And when iPadOS launched last year, it came with support for full desktop-class web browsing and the ability to actually download and store files locally, which I know still sounds super basic, but had never been doable up until that point. And now with these new announcements, Apple is clearly picking up the pace. Just consider the power we're working with. The company has said that its new A12Z chipset in the new iPad Pros is noticeably faster than the A12X chipset in last year's model, but we still don't have a great sense of the performance difference compared to the A13 Bionic chipset that is currently inside your iPhone 11 Pro. From what we've been able to gather, the biggest difference here is the addition of a new 8-core GPU. The earlier models used a 7-core configuration, but even then, Apple said that that older GPU had enough horsepower to outperform an Xbox One S. Meanwhile, an improved thermal architecture and performance controllers should help make sure the iPad Pro can handle some really heavy loads, which is nothing new for the iPad Pro, really. In terms of multi-core processing, those tablets were at the top of Apple's iOS device performance list, to the point where they've even been able to outperform some full-blown Windows laptops in Geekbench. Obviously, that doesn't mean most people will be able to do the things they want on an iPad as well or as fast as they could on a laptop, but it's still interesting to see the shifting winds in performance between tablets like the iPad and traditional PCs, and I'm really looking forward to pushing this new iPad to its limit. More importantly, Apple is continuing to make iPadOS a little more PC-like. In their latest updates, iPads will get full support for trackpads and mice. Once everything's connected, you'll see a small circular cursor whizzing around your screens and transforming itself over text and system interface elements to give you what seems like very precise control over things that were really never meant to be interacted with by a cursor in the first place. We haven't gotten a chance to try this for ourselves, but it does look dramatically better than the old hacky way of using a mouse with iPadOS, in which you had to dig through accessibility settings to enable it and still fiddle with button controls after that, and it became very clear right off the bat that it was never meant to replace the touchscreen for most people. In a relatively short period of time, Apple has built on that feature to the point that in less than a week, any iPadOS compatible tablet can start working more like a traditional computer. Arguably, though, the most interesting announcement made this week was the iPad Pro's new Magic Keyboard accessory that, when it flips open, magnetically dangles the iPad in the air above the keys. It takes just one look to know that this is a far cry from the fabric-covered Smart Keyboard. Apple says that this new keyboard is based on the 16-inch MacBook Pro's keyboard, from the backlights to its full millimeter of key travel. There's also a USB-C port in the hinge, which feels especially clever here. It uses the iPad Pro's smart connector pins for power transfer, leaving the iPad's actual own USB-C port open for accessories. Oh, and as you might have expected, it comes with a multi-touch trackpad built in. The updated iPadOS supports gestures for multitasking, app switching, getting back to the home screen, and more. And to our knowledge, those gestures will work fine on a Magic Trackpad and third-party equivalents. And don't worry if you bought the last generation iPad Pro, because those will play fine with this Magic Keyboard too. When I reviewed the 3rd gen iPad Pro last year and iPadOS after that, I was pleasantly surprised by Apple's moves towards embracing different modes of usability. iPads aren't just big phones anymore. It's not quite right to think of these as MacBook replacements either. I mean, these things aren't going to run desktop apps the way something like a Surface Pro X can. These iPads are still somewhere in the middle, trying to blend the best of both worlds, the best of smartphone and PC. If you need proof, just look at this big new camera hump. Apple squeezed in a new 10 megapixel ultra-wide camera in addition to the 12 megapixel standard camera, and over here off to the side, that's the company's wildest new addition, an incredibly small LiDAR sensor. LiDAR stands for light detection and ranging, and if you've heard of it at all before this, it's probably because it's incredibly important to the development of self-driving cars. Here, Apple is using its super tiny LiDAR array for environmental detection for augmented reality apps. It basically shoots out light and measures how fast it gets reflected back at super high speeds, which helps it quickly recognize things and spaces around you. That's especially important for AR apps that need to see your rooms, and Apple says that scene detection should be significantly faster in this new iPad because of this LiDAR. That means you can place the virtual IKEA chair you were thinking of buying in your living room, or plop a virtual game board on your coffee table that much faster. And they'll persist in space more accurately, even when people are walking in front of them, or you yourself duck behind a physical object while you're trying to look at a virtual one. Apps that use Apple's AR kit will experience some of these speed and performance benefits without any extra work required at all, but the LiDAR does give app developers more data to create new experiences with. Exactly what those new experiences will look like, I can hardly fathom at this point, but Apple did offer one particularly interesting example. It has its homemade measure app, which you can use to measure things, and in the future, it should be able to measure how tall your child is with a super quick glance. With everything going on, we're not entirely sure what the situation with reviews is, but we'll start testing this new hardware as soon as we can. In the meantime, thank you, as always, for watching. We're living through some turbulent, unsettling times. So from everyone here at Engadget to all of you, please be safe, be healthy, and be sure to look out for each other. We'll see you again soon.